I want to kick things off just by talking a little bit about the benefits of actually going retained. Personally, I'm trying to move away from using the retained word, to be honest, because I do feel like there's like a stigma around it. When you say retained, people always think like corporate recruitment, executive search. One of the most common objections I get is, oh, it won't work in my market. It's only for like CTOs and CEOs. So I rather talk about like, productizing your service and getting paid up front by your clients, because it's just a softer way to talk about it. And I would also, just as a side note, try not to use the word retained with your clients as well, because a lot of them, again, have this stigma around it. And it's much better to sort of talk about your service as a product as a whole. And you just ask for the way I always used it was, I just asked for a commitment fee up front. So don't say the word retainer. Don't pay me a retainer. Just we need a small commitment fee up front, right? Just as a little side note. So just to kick us off, so one of the benefits of going retained is you can just offer a higher overall quality of service. So the way I give examples around this really is just around the basics of recruitment. It's just things that you wouldn't think that would be impacted at all, but will be your service will massively improve because you're getting that commitment fee up front. So go back to the start of the recruitment process. Think like job qualification calls, right? Job briefings, whatever you call them. Because you've got that commitment fee up front, you're able to then spend a lot more time with the hiring manager or whoever you're speaking to go through that role in detail. Now, when you're working like to a typical contingent model, you're usually up against a couple agencies, and you're definitely usually up against the internal recruiter, right? So there's always someone you're competing with, and oftentimes they've actually got the role before you. So, how many times have you been on a job briefing where they're like, oh yeah, the other agency's got the role a day ago or 2 days ago. So immediately you're thinking, okay, crap, I need to rush through this call, because every like 5-10 minutes I spend with the hiring manager, even though that's what you should be doing to make sure the role's worth working and you've figured out all the details before you start working it. What they do is they rush through that job briefing call in 15-20 minutes, because they're always thinking, the other agencies might get hold of that star candidate who's going to get the job. But when you get that commitment fee up front, you don't have that stress or pressure anymore. So, because a lot of the time you're basically just going to be agreeing like, we'll get the role filled in 4 weeks, or we'll get the role filled in 6 weeks, whatever, right? I typically used to work to 6 weeks. Didn't used to take me that long, but 6 weeks is a nice period to have that breathing space. And even think about candidate qualification calls as well. Again, you're not having to rush through those calls. You're able to actually take your time speaking to the right candidates, being picky around who you speak to. And when you are speaking to them, you can spend those extra 5-10 minutes on the call with them, which will help you build rapport better, but also, again, you're able to dive a lot deeper into the calls. So they're just two basic examples of like how your quality of service can improve just by charging a commitment fee up front and leveraging that, because obviously you've got the extra time. Flexible working hours as well. This is a bit harder to implement, without sign off from a director or something at a bigger company. But if you're on this call and you run like a smaller business, you can absolutely start working more flexible working hours. A lot of people contact me because, yes, they're interested in getting paid up front, but they're just so sick of working 12 hours a day, chasing their tail, having to work 10 roles to fill 3 or 4, and they just don't have any work-life balance. But if you've got, say 4 roles a month, and you've only got a handful of clients, and you've already been paid up front per role, then it doesn't really matter what working hours you stick to, right? Because you're able to have much more flexibility, because you're not competing against other agencies. There's no stress. The urgency goes away. Talking about stress as well, so less stress due to lack of urgency for yourself. Forget about money and stuff for a second. Your mental health will improve massively as well, just because, again, you haven't got that constant stress and fear that you're not going to make that placement. And even if you do, you still might get your time wasted, right? Sometimes people make placements and then their time's still wasted anyway. So that was a massive game changer for me personally. Like, my enjoyment of the job improved massively, just because I was able to focus on doing the best job I can, and I didn't have that fear in the back of my head where I was like, oh, I might not get commission for this. This might be a complete waste of time and energy. Easier to forecast revenue. I don't think I need to go into too much detail around that, but the fact that you're getting paid up front per role, at least a portion of the fee anyway, you'll easily be able to look at your books and be like, okay, cool. So we've already been, worst case scenario, we're getting 15 grand this month, even if we don't get the total fee of say 30 grand. But also, and we'll go into this later on in the webinar, but you can do something called candidate pipelining, and basically you can start working roles ahead of time that haven't gone live. So again, you can start looking months ahead of time and be like, okay, so we've already received the retainer for this. We'll probably get that role filled in 2 months' time, in September-ish, maybe October. So you can forecast your revenue beyond just like the next month or so. Less clients needed due to drastically improved fill rate as well. A typical contingent recruiter who's actually good at the moment has got a fill rate of about 35 to 40%, believe it or not, which means 60-65% of the time it's a waste of time, which is crazy. And I've been there. I've worked there for years. Absolutely hated it. But when you're working to this sort of model, and there might be a transitional period, by the way, of course, but when you get to that point where 90% of your work is paid up front, you don't have to have that many clients. I always speak to people all the time, especially small business owners, and I say to them, like, you're constantly trying to win like X amount of clients a month. What if you only had like 4 clients throughout the year who just gave you 5 roles each throughout the year? That's 20 roles. They're all getting paid up front. That's a lot of money, and it's not a lot of work, really. And the quality of your work will just 10x, really, because you've got so much extra time. And then obviously it's up to you whether or not you want to continue to grow, or you just want to chill and have a flexible working life with a high performing desk. And lastly as well, much quicker time to hire. This is something that I discovered while I was doing when I started doing retained recruitment. I was so used to like waiting 3 to 7 days on average just to get feedback on a CV, and that was very normal for me in tech. And I know some recruiters who wait longer. I spoke to someone recently who's been waiting 3 weeks for CV feedback. But what you're able to do is leverage this commitment fee to implement timescales, or SLA, service level agreements, where you can say, look, you're obviously committed to filling this role. In return, what we need is you guys to promise that you're going to come back on CVs, interviews, and offers all within 24 hours. And it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing how much quicker people were coming back to CVs, which obviously then massively speeds up the time to hire as well.